Last week, our theme was the essence of true religion. If we could boil down the essential duty of human beings made in God's image, what is it that they are to be and to do? And Jesus gave us two simple directions. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbour as yourself. So that's the essence of what it means to live a life to the glory of God. And then as we come to the end of Mark's Gospel, chapter 12, Jesus takes the opportunity to point out one example where there's a group of people who are not living that God-glorifying, love-filled life. And he wants his hearers to learn from that. And then he points out another example of one who is living a love-filled and God-glorifying life. And his intention is for those who observe to imitate. And so what I intend to do in the time that we have together is to contrast that false religious profession with the true that we see at the end of this chapter. Now, as we see the life that doesn't glorify God, we're warned both to beware of those who are like this so that we can avoid coming under their influence. And when we see the example of the one whose life does glorify God and does exemplify love for God, we're encouraged to examine ourselves and consider whether we imitate and live up to that example. So first then, false religion. And it's characterized by a contentedness with being honoured, while at the same time being dishonourable. Chapter 12, verse 38. And he said unto them in his doctrine, beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, and love salutations in the marketplaces, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and the uppermost rooms at feasts, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretence make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. Now, did you notice, as I was reading that, the word love? I mean, Jesus had emphasized the place of love in a life that glorifies God. And the first commandment is this: love the Lord your God. And the second is like, love your neighbour as yourself. But the love that we meet with here is not that kind of love. It's a love that's not directed outward toward God and neighbour, but is rather directed inward toward self. And it's particularly a love of being honoured by others. And that desire for honour from others has a number of dimensions to it. We see that it's a desire for honour in terms of distinction of dress and address. So distinction of dress, they love to go in long clothing so that when people see them, they'll think, those are the holy people, the important people. And the salutations that they receive, which is when people greet them, they greet them with great formality, which reveals just how important they must be. So love of honour in terms of how they dress and how they're addressed by people. But it's also a love of honour in terms of where they're placed, both in church and also in society. They love the chief seats in the synagogues and the uppermost rooms at feasts. And that is what they really love. They want honour. They want others to think highly of them, to regard them as the important, the special, the holy, the high-ranking people. And if only they have this honour from others, they're happy. It doesn't matter how this honour comes, whether this honour is deserved. That doesn't matter. It's just that they get it. And whatever you really want, you will take the shortest route to get to. If you want to get from one place to another, you are very likely, all other things being equal, you're very likely to choose the shortest route. You wouldn't want to expend unnecessary effort. And for them, they want honour. They can get it by looking honourable without actually being honourable, and so that's what they do. They stop there. But while being content to receive honour, they are, in fact, highly dishonourable. They're dishonourable in terms of how they treat their fellow man. Remember that Jesus had said, love your neighbour as yourself, or we read here that they devour widows' houses. That's in verse 40. So we don't know precisely what that means, whether they dealt exploitatively with widows because of their high position in society and somehow got hold of their properties and impoverished them. Perhaps it meant that they didn't help widows as they should, given their position and influence. Some people suggest that they put exorbitant demands on widows in terms of hospitality and literally ate them out of house and home by going round there too often and clearing out the cupboards for themselves. But highly dishonourable, lack of love for their fellow man there. And for a pretense, make long prayers. So not only is their conduct towards man dishonourable, their conduct toward God is highly dishonourable as well. They made long prayers. They certainly knew the scriptures well. Many of the people that Jesus is talking about would have been scribes. They probably included many scriptural quotations and allusions in the prayers that they made. They prayed loud and long. Perhaps they prayed with great pathos and emotion, maybe even shed tears as they prayed. But it was all a show. It was dishonourable because it wasn't truly directed to the throne of grace. After all, they weren't seeking to live for his glory. Instead, it was directed outward to the people who might overhear the prayers, so that they would think, not only are they important, not only are they distinguished, but they're also very close to God. And so it was just another way of getting the honour that they were unworthy of. So this is what false religion looks like. This is what a life that doesn't glorify God looks like. It's content with honour, position, status, power, authority, but it's actually dishonourable. And we read here that these shall receive greater damnation. God can see through it all. God doesn't look primarily at the outward. The clothing doesn't make a difference to God. The seat that you occupy in the place of influence, that means nothing to God. God looks at the heart, and he sees the rottenness in here, the selfishness, the self-centeredness, and the willingness to use and exploit others, and even to try to use God for their own ends. And God will come, will strip such of the honour that they falsely got for themselves, and he will punish them and he'll punish them more severely than those who haven't tried to cloak their sin, because they've got plaudits they never deserved. And not only will God bring these to dishonour, but they shouldn't be held in honour by men either. Jesus is warning his hearers, don't treat people like this with esteem, because they're not worthy of it, they don't deserve it. Their life is an insult to God, and it's a pest to human society. This is a warning for us as well. Notice that Jesus says in verse 38, beware of the scribes. So he's saying, have your eyes open. Use discernment. Figure out what kinds of people these really are. Look at the whole person and take heed and act accordingly. And that's a word for us as well. We're to beware. There are many people, both in the leadership of the Christian church, or at least what's called the Christian church, and there are also many people who are leaders in society. You young people will find as you get older that there's a bit of a playground hierarchy. That there will be some children and young people who seem to be very popular, who seem to gather others around them. And that begins there in the playground, and it carries on through life. And some people, they seem to be very funny, they seem to be very clever, they seem to be very popular, they seem to look good, they seem to have a great deal of influence, and there are many who seem to speak very well of them. So they have all that honour, and yet they're highly dishonourable, because in their lives they're all about themselves. They're all about, how can I get people to think a great deal of me? How can I advance myself? And they're willing to step on whoever gets in their way to go up and up and up. And Jesus says to us, beware of people like that. Don't be awed by the titles. Don't be wowed by the position. Don't be enthralled by the status, or by the smoothness, or by the apparent cleverness of a person. But look at the heart. Look at the character. How does that person deal with others? What does that person show about his or her relationship with God? And if you see a person whose life doesn't show love to his fellow man, or whose life doesn't show honour to God, that's not a person who's worthy of honour from you. That's not a person who's worthy of you coming under that person's influence. If you find yourself in a church with a church leader who seems to lord it over people and think a lot of himself, get out of that church. Don't go there. If you, young people and children, find yourself in a friendship group where the person who's the leader likes to mock other children and young people and is a bad influence because he or she encourages others not to work hard and to get into bad habits, stay away. Don't be part of that group. Beware. If you see what's happening in society and you want to do something about it and you want to club together with others to make some kind of positive difference, be careful who your leader is. Look for someone who loves his fellow man, is humble, who loves the Lord. It's not wrong to seek honour, strictly speaking. In the first book of Samuel, God said to Eli, them that honour me I will honour. It's not wrong to seek honour. It's not wrong to seek recognition to some extent. And yet we must seek it God's way. And the way To be an honoured person is to be an honourable person, to be a lover of God and of others. And so that for you and me is a lesson not only about whose influence we come under, but also about what kinds of people we are. Is there something in you that wants recognition from others? Is there even a danger that you could be more happy with recognition from others than with a life that shows real and true love to God and to others? Beware of that. You see that in yourself, repent of it. Seek the Lord's grace to change. So that's the life that isn't lived to the glory of God. But then we have a wonderful contrast that is given to us for our imitation. And this is that of the poor widow. Verses 41 to 44. And Jesus sat over against the treasury, and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Now here we have a poor widow. It's interesting to consider, isn't it, that we read that many of the scribes exploited the widows. And perhaps that's why this widow wasn't well taken care of and was so poor. And yet even as one who was oppressed by the people who ought to have cared for her and to have taken care of her, she wasn't bitter. She lived a life full of love to the glory of God. And what characterizes this life is one that is content, not to be honoured, but to be treated with contempt or to appear contemptible. One who's content to appear contemptible and yet is truly commendable. What this woman does on the surface appears contemptible. She goes to the temple, which is the busiest building in Jerusalem, and we're now at Passover time, so many Jews have come, not only from all the different parts of the land of Judea, but even from further afield, and perhaps they've come to the temple after having not been there for a long time. And those who are rich are casting much into the treasury, that is, into the collection jars that they had there in the temple. And they were casting much in, and that appeared commendable because they were giving a great deal of what was theirs for the service of God. It appeared commendable because it looked like a great deal. And then when the widow comes, we read that she casts in 2 mites, which make a farthing. Now, in the currency of those days, that was 1/64th of a labourer's daily wage. 1/64th of what was called a denarius. So the equivalent of about 5 minutes' work this widow cast into the treasury. And that appears contemptible. It almost looks as if it's an insult to God because she's putting in so little. Can't she spare any more than that? Does she love God at all? And what difference will what she's casting in make to this great and vast work that is going on in the temple? We've got animal sacrifices happening all the time. We've got all these priests that need to be taken care of. We've got this magnificent building, which Herod the Great had even enlarged and beautified even more. We've got this building to keep up. How are those little coins going to help with all that? It appears contemptible. And perhaps people, as they saw her put those coins in, and certainly it would have been visible because Jesus could point it out, perhaps they held her in contempt. Why did she even bother coming to the temple today? But though it appeared contemptible, it was in truth commendable for a number of reasons. It was commendable because this poor widow regarded God in the offering and not man. Perhaps she knew that there would be many others who would be casting much into the treasury, and that what she cast in wouldn't look like much, and that people would look down on her for doing it. But she wasn't moved by what people thought of her in making the offering. Rather, she was moved by love for the Lord. The Lord had been so good to her. He had forgiven her sins. He had given her the life that she had. He had preserved her up until this point, even after the death of her husband. The Lord was looking after her. The Lord was communing with her every day as she meditated on His word and as she thought of an eternity with the Lord. She loved Him and she wanted to express that. And this was one of the ways for her to do it. Commendable. She was moved. Her offering was commendable because it was a genuine sacrifice. Notice we read there that many that were rich cast in much. If you've got a large income, giving a lot away isn't necessarily a sacrifice. If you're an extremely rich person, then your lifestyle isn't necessarily going to be greatly affected, even if you give a large quantity of your money to the work of God. It isn't necessarily a sacrifice. It may look impressive, but when you compare it to what you're holding back from giving to the Lord, it's actually very little by comparison. You have the opportunity to show how pious you are, but in reality, it doesn't make a dent in your life. This woman's offering was a sacrifice, because Jesus says here in verse 44, "For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living." That was what she had. Perhaps that was what she had for her next meal. Perhaps that was what she had for tomorrow. Perhaps that was what she had to get some more clothing when the old clothing that she was wearing wore out. She gave 100%. That was her tithe that she gave to the Lord. It was a real sacrifice. And so, proportionally, it was more than what they gave, though it looked like less. Her offering was commendable because it was an act of faith. Notice there it says she gave even all her living. Now, the word for living there is actually the word bios. Think biology. That is our natural physical life. This was the money that kept her alive, and she gave it away to God. But she wasn't doing that in a foolhardy way. She didn't have a suicide risk. She wasn't doing that because she thought she loved God so much that she would starve to death. It was an act of faith. It was a way of saying, "Lord, you've given this to me, and just as through my whole life you have taken care of me, and it's not money that's put bread on the table every day, it's you, I'm trusting you. And so I'm giving you this money as an act of my faith." And I can guarantee you, we're not told the rest of the story of this woman's life, but I can guarantee you that there was bread on the table that night for this woman who gave in faith. Now you and I, if we are to be true lovers of the Lord and those who live life to the glory of God, we are to be those who are content to appear contemptible. Whose Christian lives may be understood. People may think we're actually not very good people, or we're not very selfless. And there are people who will misunderstand the spiritual service that we give to God, and the ways that we use our money, and the ways that we use our time, and they may actually think we're unloving even. But we have to be content to appear that way, and even to be held in dishonour by people, because we have a different priority. We want to live a life that is truly commendable, a life that truly honours God, and sometimes people will misunderstand that, just as they would have misunderstood the offering of this widow. And let me apply this specifically to this issue of giving. Now, when you go to some churches, there will be a big push in every service, I've seen this, to give to the work of the church. We don't do that here at St Silas, both because our main priority is for people to come to Christ and the cross, not to part with their wallets. And if you are talking to people about their wallets every week, they'll think that's the church's main message. Well, we don't want that. But we also don't make constant appeals because we trust that the Lord will keep this work going. If we do it obediently and we do it to honour him, then he will provide the means. I've seen that in my life. I'm sure many of you here have the same. So we want this to be a testimony to the Lord's faithfulness. So we want people to be able to give freely. But let me speak to you about some of the principles behind Christian giving, because this is a way to live a commendable life to the glory of God. Now, just like this woman, we have to have God in our view. And we don't just give because it's an expectation. You're a church member and that's what you do. We don't give because we don't want that awkward moment where it looks like we're not part of the team supporting. We don't give because, well, that's what we've always done. And we certainly don't give because we want people to think a great deal of us, how sacrificial or how heavenly minded we are, or anything like that. We give primarily because of what he has given to us. God has given us salvation through Jesus Christ free of charge. You know you can never pay that back. There's nothing that we could ever give to God. Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were an offering far too small, said Isaac Watts. A love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. And yet, because of that love, we want to make a return. And with what we have, we say, Lord, we give this to you. So we give out of love to God. We give as a sacrifice. A true act of love to God, and especially a true act of love to God in the light of his sacrifice. His son gave his all. Demands a sacrifice from us. Which means that our Christian giving can't just be a comfortable amount that means that we get to do everything we want to do, live the kind of life we want to live, and then if there's anything left, the Lord can have that. Because that's not really giving at all. That's just tossing God the loose change. But we put him first, and we give an amount that is going to make a dent, that is going to help us feel the pinch, because we're saying, Lord, if you made a sacrifice for us, then we are going to sacrifice to you. And it has to be sacrificial giving in order for it to be the third thing that the widow's offering was, which is an act of faith. We have to give in such a way that in financial things and in our everyday life, we're forced to rely on the Lord. This has been a wonderful experience for me coming out of the Church of England, because in my previous ministry, I was very well provided for and could rely on a stipend that was essentially a salary. And it shouldn't be, but it's very easy when you have that coming in not to rely on God, because you just think stable income, everything's okay, we'll be fine. But ever since then we've had to live a bit more day to day, and actually that's been spiritually good. So we need to give in such a way that we have to rely on God, the things that we want. And then when God comes to you, because you give and you make a sacrifice, and He provides you with the holiday, or with the treat, or with the gift from a friend, or whatever it may be, you'll see His hand more clearly, and you'll be able to enjoy a closer walk with Him. So we see here then two different kinds of life that are open to us. We see the self-absorbed life, the life that wants everybody else to think highly of you, even though actually you're not worthy to be thought highly of. And we see where that's going. That's going towards destruction. Jesus says, keep a distance from those who want to influence you to be that way, and don't become like them, because not only will you be loathsome to God and to discerning men even now, you'll also be under the judgment and condemnation of God at the end. And then we see, by contrast, this beautiful picture of a life lived to the glory of God. Yes, it doesn't look like much in the eyes of men. But who was it that commended the widow? Jesus. It was Jesus. It was He who commended her. It was He who pointed her out. Now, if you live a life that people don't think much of, but there is a genuine life lived to the love and the glory of God, and Jesus is looking down from heaven and He is commending you. He is looking down from heaven, and we may say He's pointed to the angels and saying, this is one of mine. This is one who is truly living in my image. You want that commendation? Then let's imitate this poor widow. Amen.